love being on boards. Most of my board experience has been on public sector or not-for-profit, which is kind of a compulsory rite of passage if you want to be a director in this country, particularly if you're a woman, I'm going to say it. So our purpose is twofold. One is to generate revenue for the community. The other one is to minimise harm while doing that. And Pasifika and Māori are disproportionately harmed. Lotto were always world leaders in the space, but I think in the last 3 years, it's so much more at the centre of what we do, and I feel quite proud because I feel like I've been part of that. On the positive side, on boards and anything I do, it's about diversity in the team and representation of women at the right levels. We want to reflect the community that we represent. I've never been as successful financially as I could have been because I've made decisions based on what's right for others. Pursuit of money is not my goal. And when I was a younger lawyer, we had a phone call with the General Counsel for Dell. It's the biggest outsourcing deal in Australia at that point. And I said it went really well. I got through all my points, and I think she understood where it came from. And he basically said to me, you took no time to connect with her at the beginning of the call. If you need her to work with you on something, you need to create that connection. I've always held that. When I first work for a client, or we're negotiating, or I'm advising, or sitting on a board, it is about getting to know those people around the table.
Well, thanks for coming on. From when we started the podcast, we thought you would be a great guest because we were thinking about how do you have conversations about people and give it a silly title like Ways to Wealth, but like wealth being, I guess, a state of happiness or a state of fulfillment where you're living the life that you want to live as best you can.
Yep.
And the objective for us was, like kind of organic conversations, just learn from people's journeys, and then hopefully that would be helpful to other people out there trying to kind of obtain, I guess, a better outcome, right?
Cool.
Yeah.
Awesome.
So you have quite a few things on the go. You are into a lot of different things. What's the thing that's at the top for you at the moment?
Governance.
Okay.
Yeah, so I love being on boards, and most of my board experience has been on public sector or not-for-profit, which is kind of almost a compulsory rite of passage if you want to be a director in this country, particularly if you're a woman, I'm going to say it.
Yes.
But it's actually made me realise I really enjoy the work in governance for a few reasons. And someone said to me once, or said to a few people, most people get into governance for ego. It just sounds like a really cool thing, right? I'm a director on a board. And it's really when you've been on boards for a while and you're there because of your subject matter expertise, which for me is technology and law and commercial, and the fact that I've got Pacific Island Samoan heritage, but actually start to realise why you're there. And it sort of hit me a few years ago was equity. So obviously the opportunity to try and influence outcomes is much more likely on public sector boards, but also it's definitely something that I think we need more in governance in the private sector. There's a lot of ESG, all those good things, but having a shareholder value in a company balanced with community, customers and employees and the environment, and throwing all those things together, I think is something that we need more of.
Yeah. And
I think I bring that perspective. So yeah, and at this stage in my life, I'm starting to transition to spending more time in governance. So it's kind of up there at the moment. Do
you think there's more women trying to do that kind of thing?
Yeah, I find that most women on boards, particularly what I'll call the newer generation, so that's not an age thing, but the cohort that are like me trying to get onto boards are there for quite different reasons to why women joined boards 30 years ago.
Okay.
And not that they didn't have the right reasons. I think just in terms of what we're naturally focusing on today is quite different.
And so what are the things that you are naturally focusing on today then?
Yeah, so I think for me, for example, on the board of Lotto New Zealand, ostensibly it was all about technology and us becoming much bigger in digital, particularly after COVID. But for me, it's about harm minimisation.
Okay.
So our purpose is twofold. One is to generate revenue for the community, but the other one is, they're both, they're equal in terms of importance, is to minimise harm while doing that. And Pasifika and Māori are disproportionately harmed. So that work to actually go, how do we make harm a real part of our culture at every level, including the board, Lotto were always, world leaders in this space, but I think in particularly the last 3 years, you talk to the team, it's so much more at the centre of what we do, and I feel quite proud because I feel like I've been part of that.
Yeah.
So the harm, that's the negative side.
Yeah.
On the positive side, on boards and anything I do, it's about diversity in the team and representation of women at the right levels. It is about representation of, so in Lotto, for example, we want to reflect the community that we represent. Mm-hmm. Same with ACC. So having that hat on and having that lens on what we do is something that I've become increasingly focused on. So, yeah.
So equity is obviously something that's very important to you. Mm-hmm. How has that filtered into other parts of your life?
So with my day job, the one that pays the bills,
yes.
I never thought I'd be able to bring those two things together. So day job is technology consulting, commercial procurement, sort of not the techie coding stuff. And someone said to me once, and I was like, I feel like I need to keep doing all this work outside of work because I can't see a way of doing it in my work, which is crazy now I look at it. So we've recently become involved in, we've always done work around sort of technology capability. So what does an organisation need? And we started doing work with a skills framework. And then what I realised as we went through it is it actually creates a level playing field. So if you've got someone in a contact centre, generally they will be women, Māori, Pasifika, Asian immigrants. They don't have a CV that reflects a tech background. So they don't see a pathway into digital or technology roles. But by using the framework, you can actually objectively define the skills they have taken on as being a customer services representative or a team leader, and then help map that into entry-level technology roles and create pathways. So we started to do that work. It's been quite interesting because it makes us zero money. We're trying to do the sort of dual thing of how do we help our clients, who are the paying clients, to generate more talent from within. Because a lot of our clients actually who have got growing contact centres, because that's how we work today, do want to create pathways, do want to hold those people, don't want those jobs to be seen as entry-level dead-end jobs. So they're keen, but it's a real change in mindset. Mm-hmm. So, I think we're quite early on in that journey. And then on the other side is how do we work out in the communities with community-based organisations, churches and so forth, to help them become aware and bring those people to that and not see it as something that's being imposed on them as well. So yeah, it's quite exciting.
Yeah, how do you join those two together? So, the not being imposed but trying to uplift maybe? How do you bring that together? Well,
we, a couple of people in my team, two of our, and again, this is how we've, how can I bring more equity to the world? We went to Rea.coach and who do cadetships and internships for people who want to start a digital career, and most that they're targeting a lot of people who don't have degrees, university degrees. So we hired 2 awesome women from there, and I showed them all these slides about the framework of this, and they were just like, just tell a story. So that to me was really important, is taking myself out of the corporate ivory tower and understanding how to communicate. So we created a fictional character called Mele. We AI'd her look, and we created a background, and we tell it through that story. And I think then finding the right people to connect with who will take that back into the communities rather than us always being the ones to go, and I think's a good way to start. Yeah.
What was it that made you want to start up Ara Digital?
Yep. So it was either a choice 9 and a bit years ago of I felt like I wanted to be more of a independent advisor. So I got a background in IT and then law, technology law, and then technology commercial. And I just felt like I wanted more time, and I've always loved doing a diversity of things. So I studied law while I was working as an IT manager and marketing manager for a law firm.
Okay.
So I've always loved having that mix of practical and academic, continued learning. So with Ara or consulting, I felt that I would constantly have new work. I found I tended to get bored. Once I'd been in a job for a couple of years and got through all the challenges, I would want to move on. So I had the realisation that maybe I actually need to be a consultant or something that works on specific discrete projects. And the reason for doing what we do at Ara is there's no one in New Zealand really in that space between the big consulting firms like Deloitte and EY and all those, and then your one-man bands, sort of people who are contracting themselves with my own toolkit and my experience. We wanted to create a team, build IP, leverage methodology, and have long-lasting relationships with clients that didn't require them to hire people full-time.
Okay.
So I started it as the New Zealand branch of an Australian boutique firm. I didn't have the courage to do it myself. Looking back, I was like, I wish I could go back and tell my young self. But it's been great because I learnt lots of things from the Australian firm. Working across the Tasman, you get so much more experience, which is I think is really good for New Zealand as well, and good for them.
Yeah.
We found this sort of niche in the middle, which is there's not many and even today, 9 and a bit years later, there are not many firms who operate in that space.
What have been some of the challenges that you've come up across?
So the challenges personally and professionally. So
both.
personally, if I'd known then that starting a business with no brand, no staff, no pipeline, no clients was going to be as difficult as it was, I maybe might not have done it, but maybe it's good that I didn't because I'm glad I did. It's taken a long time and I had a lot of learning to do. I'd never really worked as a consultant. I'd worked as a lawyer, but not, so chasing business, building a team in that, it's been great. But I also have that, I think that lawyer in me always is, I kind of go between being a team person and being very much a soul person who loves to just sit and read and digest. So that's been quite interesting. And I think that's why I kept my board roles and kept doing that all the way through. So professionally, it's been a big learning curve. But when you look back, and I was talking to Alistair, who's been there with me for most of that journey, when we look back at ourselves, we're like, wow, we've come a long way in a positive way, which is great. Personally, I think something that I've always struggled with in my life is balance. And that was hard even when I was on my own, didn't have anyone to think about but myself. And then once you then have a partner and then children, animals, older parents. And I've always wanted to have a balance in life. And I think it's only now at my ripe old age of 54, I feel like I'm starting to finally get that. So, yeah.
So what does the balance look like then?
Balance for me means I can get up in the morning and not feel stress and anxiety and have to go and sit at my desk to do the things that I felt I should have done before then. Success is getting up, doing some stretching. I know this sounds very wellness, but it's not like I'm doing yoga or anything. I make myself a cup of tea and I sit down and I just do some stretching for 5 minutes. Even if it's 1 minute, just trying to get into that habit of doing that. And then success is being around and making my kids breakfast or lunch. So this morning I did crepes, my partner did the lunches, seeing them off or them seeing me off. And then having a day where I have some space in it to think and not doing what many people do in life, which is meeting after meeting after meeting and then clearing emails and then doing it all again the next day. So being able to sit at, and you're working on something and then go, and then you suddenly think about something, like if I'm reading board papers and a topic comes up, to have the space to be able to go and explore that, or at least have some space in your week. One of New Zealand's great entrepreneurs, I think her name's Claudia Batten, she's based in Aspen. She said she keeps Fridays totally clear, no appointments, no to-do list, and it's her day. She just kind of works through it in terms of where her mind goes. So I think having a bit of time each day to do that, and some exercise. I love cycling.
Okay.
It's my passion. I make myself go to the gym by having a personal trainer that I have to pay even if I don't turn up. So I've been consistently doing that for the first time in my life for about I'm going on to my 4th year now.
Oh, wow.
And walking the dogs. And then just having good family time at night. A big difference to where I used to be up until quite recently, which was get up in the morning, do some work, try and do some exercise, feel guilty because I haven't, often leave the building before I see the kids, don't know what they're having for lunch, don't know what they had for breakfast. Now I do, take them to practice, pick them up and take them to tutoring or community service. So it's having that mix is what we all aspire to, right?
Totally.
But I feel like it's finally starting to shift towards the right direction.
Was there a catalyst for that change?
It started, I think, when my mum died, which was coincidentally 9.5 years ago. And I think, she never worked or had a career once we were born. And I kind of always felt for her because she was such an intelligent woman and I wish she had. And I think she would have benefited from having a career, but also being the mum she was, which was always about us and our family. She was the glue that holds our extended family together, Ara Inga. And it was all about food and bringing us together over food and once she went, it kind of hit me that I was the only one if I didn't do it in my group of cousins in New Zealand and even offshore, we'd lose it. So it's a bit of a joke. They all call me the old auntie lady now, but even my cousins. So since Mum died, I've been more connected to my family and more committed to it than ever. And that's really important for my kids as well, because we live in a very European Pakeha part of Auckland. So for them to hold on to our Samoan heritage is really important. I think the other catalyst is that over time your body and your brain start to tell you can't do it anymore. And nobody wants to get to that point where you think, oh, it's not, you hear stories about people getting sick and making life changes. You go, how do you make that happen without getting to that point? So I think that's a big one. I think also looking at your kids, mine are just into the teenage years now. One's about to become a teenager and one is 15, and actually they need you more now than they did when they were 2 or 3, when they were very wrapped up in a nice, lovely bubble. So, yeah.
You're not the only person who's told me that.
Yeah.
Because I was a stay-at-home mum for 8 years, and some of my friends are starting to talk about, well, actually, maybe, if you can offer that same time period while they're in their teenage years, it could be beneficial.
Yeah. Absolutely, but I think don't take away from the 8 years you did have as well.
No.
That's actually more for you.
Yeah. Well, I was very privileged to be able to do that, I think.
Yeah.
You mentioned that, family and extended family is very important to you. Do you think that feeds into what wealth looks like for you?
Yeah, so, and I have thought about that recently, because one thing I always joke about is that I've never been successful financially as I could have been, because pursuit of money is not my goal.
Yeah.
Having said that, I'm very privileged in my life. I was very lucky as a kid, and we have a lovely home and lots of things. So, but I have no doubt that I look at the people around me, and because I've made decisions based on what's right for others, and what's right for me, not in a financial way. So at Ara, for example, or even with clients or anyone, to me, I always think when you say go to work, work is not a family, because your family's at home, right? And they're the people who actually at the end of the day do matter. But coming to work in a community where you like and respect and can have fun together as well as learn from each other. So, Ara, and people have genuinely said that it's the best place they've ever worked, because, we emphasise food, we emphasise autonomy. We try and have days in the office, but I don't agree with mandating. If you don't provide a reason for people to come in that actually they feel they want to, then I'm not going to force you. There's something missing there. So, we have a Friday shared, Mondays and Fridays we have lunch together.
That's
sometimes
awesome.
someone cooks, sometimes we bring stuff in, sometimes we all take turns in doing the supermarket roster and stuff. And one of our team is French, and, we used to all make our lunches and then go sit at our desks, and he's just like, that is not happening. So even if it's not all of us, those who aren't on calls will come and sit together and have lunch, and I think that's really, really important. And we try and create opportunities to do peer learning on those days.
Yeah.
So really create reasons for people to come in. And even with any meeting I go to, I often will take food, because it just brings people together.
Yeah.
And so I think that's part of who I am in my work. I learned at a very young, and when I was a younger lawyer, I had a call when I first moved to Sydney in a big corporate law firm. And we were working on a huge deal, and I was quite nervous. We had a phone call with the general counsel for Dell, who were huge in those days. And she was based in Singapore, and my boss in Sydney, I'd only been working for him for a few weeks. I'd reviewed the agreement. He asked me to prepare, what I wanted to negotiate on the call. So we sat on the call, and we went through the call, and it's the biggest outsourcing deal in Australia at that point, desktops. I was quite... And at the end of it, we finished the call, and he said to me, how do you think it went? And I said, it went really well. I got through all my points, and I think she understood where it came from. And he basically said to me, you took no time to connect with her at the beginning of the call. He said it in a lovely way, the way he said it. And he said, so when you left the call, you were very polite and respectful. He said, but if you need her to work with you on something, you need to create that connection. And I've always held that. And when I first work for a client, or we're negotiating, or I'm advising, or sitting on a board, it is about getting to know those people around the table, or who are working with you. So, yeah.
How much do you think your upbringing has influenced what you've chosen to spend your time on?
Massively. Both my parents came from working class backgrounds. My dad grew up in a state house with a single mum. didn't go to university. He's an aircraft engineer. In those days, you could do that as an apprentice.
Yeah.
My mum came from a village in Samoa. I think she left school when she was 12 or 13. Incredibly bright woman, mathematically, but never had opportunity. And as a Samoan, she was a mixture. So in Samoan, used to call it Afakasi, so half caste. So Samoan, Chinese, French, German, so a big mix.
Yeah.
But they were usually in the islands, if you've got a mix and you're one of the wealthier families, but they weren't.
Okay.
They came from a village, quite, basic home and stuff. So very aspirational. My dad also, but in a different way. And for them, education was about vocation and aspiration. And, for my mum, when I became a lawyer, it was like the biggest thing in the world. And I really think that influenced my choices. And looking back now, if I had had a family like I think me and my partner are, which is what do you care about? What are you good at and interested in? I think I would have still done a law degree. I don't think I would have done commerce.
Yep.
Because I actually found it really boring pretty quickly. I would have done something like a BA in philosophy or psychology and probably gone into public sector and policy or something like that. Or I always wanted to be a litigator, that's why I did law. And then I was kind of told that, no, you need to be a commercial IT lawyer because look, it's this new big thing. Okay. So I followed the money.
Yeah.
And you can't regret that because it's brought me to where I am today. And so now I'm going, okay, those things that, potentially I would have done if I'd had a different path shown to me, I can still do that.
Yeah.
And I've got a skill set that helps me to sort of qualify me maybe to get into those spaces a bit more.
Okay.
Yeah.
So obviously family is important to you as well. Mm-hmm. So we have conversations with the people that we talk to around intergenerational wealth and how does that flow into your children. And so if it's not necessarily about money, what are your hopes what are you hoping to pass on to your kids?
My children, yeah. So the first one I've talked about, which is, following your passions, but I also, my big thing to them is you need to be financially independent, but you don't need to be rich.
Yep.
You need to be able to look after yourself, and if you need to help people you care about, be able to do that. And then the third thing is to be a person who is good and kind to others. And I know that sounds all very apple pie, motherhood, but those three things, if you have those things, then you're going to be pretty happy.
Yeah.
And when I've reflected on my parents, so my mum, even though the showings of success were important to her, it wasn't that she wore designer gear or anything. In fact, she was a real thrifty shopper. But for her, it was about experiences, being able to travel to visit family, being able to enjoy the food and wine that you wanted, and being able to send your children to school that you wanted them to go to. For my dad, it was pretty similar. He came from I think because he's that little bit older, grew up probably, in New Zealand during the post-war and understood that, scarcity.
Yeah.
So he's incredibly conservative. And it wasn't until my mum passed away that I realised, he became more of who he was without her. And he just will not spend money unless you absolutely force him at his own detriment.
Yes.
So they both come from relatively working class backgrounds. But if I look at them, my dad's always earned money really well. But what he did with it, because he had nobody around him, he doesn't have a superannuation. He doesn't have KiwiSave, has nothing like that.
Okay.
He owned a business and sold it and did really well, but he didn't invest in rental properties. He actually ended up spending it, unfortunately, on some family, the darker side of my family, which is a sibling who has lots of challenges, and they lost lots of money. And so my parents didn't end up, my dad now, my mum died 15 years ago, didn't end up in a particularly strong place financially. And so we're lucky that we can help him. So for my kids, what I want them to do is, and unfortunately I feel like I've kind of almost, I was reflecting on the way here, I've always been really good at earning money, and I had some rental properties, I've not kept them. And we do live for today to a large degree, my partner and I. We're both youngest children. And, if we'd been much more, not living so much for this year today, we probably would have more assets and net worth. Having said that, our children go to a great school, we live in a place we want to live in, and we generally do what we want to do. But you know, as I get to that age at 55 and you start to do calculations, you go, I wish I had actually, you know, been a bit more careful. So that's the thing I'm trying to teach the kids now. So my 15-year-old has a part-time job. She works at her dad's jewelry store. They've both been umpiring netball since they were 10 or 11, so they get paid for that first job.
Yeah.
So we've set up there's an app called Square One. It's a New Zealand one. It's brilliant. And so teaching them that if they save, I will give them interest on it, but it's locked because they've learnt they'll just spend it.
Yeah.
So really, that's the big thing I want to pass on, is not how we've done it, which is to have more of a balance around long-term and today. So that's the big one for me.
And how like open is the dialogue in the household around finances?
Very.
Really kind of just.
Yeah, so the kids understand that we have a mortgage, and that if I possibly had made some different, you know, kept the rental properties, not left this place when I did, we could possibly be mortgage free and or still have rental properties. And to date, that hasn't meant anything to me, but I've said to them, what it gives you is choices. And I've always felt like I didn't need choices because my job was to be the primary income earner and all that. But actually now I'm at that point in life where I go, actually, I would like, the choice would mean I can not work 3 days a week, or I could earn a lot less and it wouldn't affect our quality of life or our choices in life. So we talk about those things.
Yeah.
I think what also impacted me young was my dad was an aircraft engineer, came from New Zealand to Samoa, then we went to Singapore, and we were expats there, but we weren't the rich expats. We were the sort of the working class expats, which didn't really worry me. And then we came to New Zealand, and Dad couldn't get a job here because he'd almost skilled himself out of the market. He couldn't get in, so he had to go back on the tools. And we went through a pretty tough time financially as a family, and it really hit me because we'd never had that. And then Dad had to end up going back to Singapore to work to earn. He ended up taking the business and all that, but I don't want to go through that dippy, and I've never wanted my kids to go through that. I've always wanted them to feel that security, which means I put a lot of pressure on myself. And so in the last year, my partner and I have talked a bit more about that, and it upset me because the kids are now like, oh, we're broke now, and I'm like, we're not broke. I'm trying to talk to you about these things.
Relative,
we've just been to Europe for a month's holiday. I'm like, we're not broke, you know.
Well, that's it. So we're going through something similar with our kids, and it's like, how do you share what you've got but not spoil them?
Because it is hard, right? Because you want to do everything, and I think that impacted when I was younger, and it was a short window, but it did really, I think it was a formative time. Probably was, I don't know, 10 or 11, and we'd gone from being expats that were very comfortable, and when you came to New Zealand, you know, you lived this great lifestyle in Singapore, and then you come to New Zealand and we'd have visitors come from Singapore, and I'd feel like the poor cousin. And so I think that, unfortunately, if I'd probably talked it through and processed it a bit better, it wouldn't have impacted me, but it meant that I think I've tried to make up for that too much with my kids. Okay. And now we're trying to reel that back.
Yeah.
Hopefully we have it, you know, we're still...
There's still got time.
Yeah.
So last question. What advice would you give to someone who is starting out on their wealth journey?
Stick to that little often principle. So when I got my first job, I put 10% away. We didn't have KiwiSaver then. If we had, I would have been made. I put it into a managed fund and ended up taking it out to buy my first house. And then, so set a path and hold to it, and don't even think about that money. I do wish we had something like Australia in this country where it just left your pay packet without any choice. That's number one. Number two, do balance today and tomorrow. I've got friends who are too far the other way, and like my dad, enjoy life, focus on experience over things. And I think, in terms of your choices about the work that you do, there has to be a balance between what you're genuinely interested in and, people say, follow your passion. I think that's too simplistic. And in fact, I hear career advisors saying, do not tell your children to follow their passions. Because where does that take you? You know, I want to be an influencer generally is where that takes my 15-year-old at the moment. It's
YouTuber.
Yeah, it's like, think about what you enjoy. And I think also don't think about a degree. It's like, if you enjoy that, what could that look like in different roles? And I think the other thing is, in terms of, the big thing that worries me, not for my kids, because they're lucky with us, we've got enough of net worth that they can have a start with a home, is that you don't have to own your own home. I think in New Zealand we fall into this trap of, if you are a renter, you're a second-class citizen, and poor you, partly because our property laws don't protect tenants the way that they do in Europe particularly. Hopefully the model will start to evolve, but actually there are places now in New Zealand where they're trying to, some developers are actually putting up properties where you can have long-term rentals. Think about the options. If you do rent, what can you do with that money? And that's where the money that you should probably put into a balanced fund or something like that, or a growth fund if you're young.
Okay.
And I think probably the last thing would be, don't look at education as a vocational thing. Look at education as being an opportunity that if you've got the opportunity to go and study at university or at any of the other different types of education that we have today, or opportunities like that, look at that as a privilege to be able to grow your mind, and that will lead you to ways that you probably wouldn't have thought of, and just be open to that.
Cool. Awesome. Thank you so
Thank
much.
you so much.
Thank you. Is that
Cheers.
it?
Yeah.
Wow.
That's it.
108.
Oh my goodness. I keep looking up there and I didn't even register.